The audience was not much interested in knowing the exact details or facts of historical events. They were rather more interested to know about the emotional response of the characters involved in any historical event. So that is what Shakespeare gave them, and that is what makes him universal and relevant even today. Hello and welcome back to Nibblepop. We are doing this History of English Literature series, and in today's video we are going to look at Renaissance drama under Shakespeare and his successors. That means the people who came after Shakespeare or his contemporaries too. So it is not going to be just about Shakespeare, but also people like Ben Jonson, Beaumont and Fletcher, and so on. Stay with me till the end of this video because this is going to be very important if you are pursuing your undergraduate level studies or are planning to sit for the competitive exams like NET and SET. Feel free to ask anything in the comment section and add your suggestions about things which I might have missed while dealing with this particular subject. This is Monami Mukherjee. Welcome once again. When it comes to Shakespeare, it is customary to look at his works, his dramatic works, parallel to his life. His life was basically divided into different periods, and usually historians, literary historians, they prefer to divide his entire group of works, especially the plays, according to the periods of his life. Now, that makes us get into a problem. You see, because Shakespeare did not write a single type of genre during a certain period of his life. Therefore, when we classify his works according to the periods of his life, that is chronologically, then we end up with a mixed bag of plays all the time, which might not be uniform in form or style or theme. Again, if we classify his works according to themes or genres such as tragedies and comedies and historical plays and so on, then also we come across this problem of getting mixed so far as the chronology is concerned, which means that we don't have the single line or a single timeline according to his life. Now, let us begin at the beginning. Like when we think about Shakespeare, let's first see how Shakespeare became Shakespeare. Okay, so this man, William Shakespeare, he is full of enigma, full of mystery when it comes to his birth, his birthplace, and his early life. We cannot be sure about many details here. We are not sure about exact date of his birth, although it's believed that he was born on the 23rd of April because he was baptized on 26th of April. The point is, he was born in a place called Stratford-on-Avon. It was in a district which was very romantic, and it was not representative of any city life. It was surrounded by these romantic places like the Forest of Arden and these cliffs and these faraway places. And this particular place, Stratford, with its surroundings, that had a very important influence on Shakespeare's mind because he was growing up in this setting. And these images, these romantic images, keep appearing in his plays, as we will be discussing later. So just remember that this setting of Stratford was extremely important because that place represented whatever was natural in man. Now, where did Shakespeare become Shakespeare? He became Shakespeare in the city of London, and London was diametrically opposite to Stratford. London was the hub of things that are happening. It was like the center of political power, world political power, and therefore, what we see in Shakespeare is a kind of mixed influence. On one hand, this natural bounty of Stratford, this unspoiled nature, and on the other hand, the extreme height of civilization, extreme height of political power represented by London. Now, it is very interesting how in Shakespeare, in almost all his plays, we find reflections of both these worlds. And perhaps that is why Shakespeare could understand what people wanted from drama, because he was not confined to any one particular type of place. He had this experience of these two opposite places. He could very well create something that was a combination and that could address people who belong to these two extremes. And that is why Shakespeare's plays are so universal in nature. They appeal to everybody. You remember I was talking about Burbage and his theatre company, right? So in around 1587, that time, Shakespeare, he joined Burbage's company, and it's very interesting because Shakespeare, he started as an actor. Then he started to revise other people's plays, and eventually he became a dramatist himself. So it was a very gradual growth, and he kind of collected all his experience, first as an actor, then as a reviser and a collaborator. And that is why in many of Shakespeare's plays, at least in the early plays, we find a lot of collaboration where 2-3 people, they work together and write a play. Now, chronologically, we can divide Shakespeare's entire body of work into 4 periods. So let's just look at these chronological classifications first, and I'm going to mention to you names of some of the plays, and I will list the other plays under this period or under this class alongside. So please make a note. Okay. So the first phase is a time of early experimentation. And when I was talking about Marlowe, remember I said that Shakespeare did not write a single successful play before Marlowe died. So I'm just talking about this particular phase. The phase which was, it coincided with the lifetime of Marlowe, the writing lifetime of Marlowe, roughly coinciding. And we find a lot of experimentation here. He uses blank verse, but there is a lot of use of rhymed couplet along with blank verse. So he is showing some innovative spark here, but they were not as popular as Marlowe's plays were. Okay, now if I have to give examples of plays from this period, I would like to mention the play Richard III, Two Gentlemen of Verona, which is a comedy, and Love's Labour Lost. Love's Labour Lost was quite popular during the time. But these were the starting point of his career. So we cannot compare them to later marvels of his later periods. Right. So now coming to the second phase of his literary life, we see rapid growth and development. This phase was sometime between 1595 to roughly 1600. Now, these dates are again kind of roughly estimated because it's difficult to pinpoint exactly when he wrote something. It's more like when it was performed. So 1595 to 1600 may be seen as a time when his genius was developing in a rapid speed. And what are the plays we have during this time? We have The Merchant of Venice, As You Like It. Midsummer Night's Dream is comparatively less read by children, and it has dream-like sequences and this fantasy land, all these romantic elements creeping in. We have historical plays here too, Henry IV. So we have a lot of variety in the second phase or the second part of his literary life. Coming to the third part, which is supposed to be, or which is considered to be, the most remarkable phase of Shakespeare's writing, comes between 1600 and 1607. And although it is the most remarkable time of his literary life, it is also the gloomiest one, where he deals with the darkest side of human nature. So, with the second phase, he was showing some mastery or some knowledge of human nature, and the plots were getting more complex. But with the third phase, we see a real mastery of human emotions. And what are the miraculous plays he wrote during this phase? The five greatest tragedies by Shakespeare, the most popular tragedies by Shakespeare: King Lear, Hamlet, Macbeth, Othello, and Julius Caesar. These were written during this phase. Among comedies, it's very important to mention Twelfth Night. And parallel to this, he was writing the sonnets. Now, I have already talked about Shakespeare's sonnets at length in our discussion on Renaissance poetry. The link is going up there, so you can have a look after you finish this video. Don't get distracted right now. The point is, all these plays and these poems, they reveal the crisis of human choice, the crisis of human judgment, the clash between morality and ambition and human desire. All these issues are handled with such mastery and skill. And although Twelfth Night is a comedy, we see that he blends in all these tragic ethos, or these pathos, you can say, and he kind of builds an atmosphere where even the comic scenario, the happy scenario, appears to be melancholic. This is the best phase of Shakespeare's writing, because this is where he makes us realize that drama is nothing but a reflection of life, and life is nothing but a blend of the tragic and the comic. You cannot have a single emotion in life, just like you cannot have a uniform genre. And this develops, this blend of tragedy and comedy develops fully in his fourth phase, where we have the tragicomedies, or the dark comedies, like the Tempest. So the fourth phase comes at the extreme end of his career. And why I have mentioned the Tempest is because sometimes, in the words of Prospero, we can hear Shakespeare's own idea of life, that life is all but a dream, and somehow his whole idea that this whole world is a stage, this whole idea is expressed so beautifully in his tragicomedies. Another very beautiful play written during this period is The Winter's Tale, and somehow this title itself is so suggestive that he was talking about a life which is full and mature, because now he was quite mature in his writing. But at the same time, he was talking about the limitation of that imagination. What limitation? Rather, not limitation of imagination. He knew that imagination does not have any limits, but language has limits. Maybe this thought disturbed him so much that he stopped writing altogether, and he retired to his village, back to his wife, spent a retired life the way he wanted. But this was probably also because he felt at some point that language was not capable of actually reflecting everything that a person imagines. So that is a chronological division of Shakespeare's literary life. And at the same time, if we look at the generic divisions, which means that genre means a kind of or a style of literature. For example, novel is a genre, tragedy is a genre, comedy is a genre. So if we classify his works according to these genres or groups or types, then we see that Shakespeare mostly wrote historical plays, partly historical or semi-historical plays, comedies and tragicomedies. So these are the four kinds of divisions which we have, although we can also see revenge tragedy mode in case of plays like Hamlet and even Othello too. Now, the point is, the problem with these classifications is that Shakespeare does not adhere to classical models, even in these classifications. So, when he is writing a historical play, he mostly based his work on Holinshed's Chronicles, Holinshed's record. Holinshed was also a pretty imaginative guy, so sometimes his records were also quite, you know what. But still, Shakespeare, what he did not, adhere completely to Holinshed. He departed, he changed, he evolved. Okay, so with passage of time, he became more and more confident because he knew what the audience was demanding. The audience was not much interested in knowing the exact details or facts of historical events. They were rather more interested to know about the emotional response of the characters involved in any historical event. So that is what Shakespeare gave them, and that is what makes him universal and relevant even today, which means that maybe he changed a little fact of Macbeth's life here and there, but what he ended up creating is something which appeals to any ambitious man, any man who is ready to cross that boundary of morality. So that makes him universal. So his way of historiographing, or rather, what should I say, reinventing history in his own way, has a literary merit, because that makes it less fact and more fiction, and therefore more appealing to imagination. Coming to comedies, what he did, he continued and developed the tradition of romantic comedies. And if you have watched the previous video, you would know who started the romantic comedies and popularized it. Okay, let me just see if you remember the name. Write the name down in the comment section. Who popularized or started the romantic comedy tradition in Renaissance drama? Anyway, Shakespeare popularized it later, of course, and in his romantic drama, certain features, common features were found. Mostly, if you take the example of The Merchant of Venice, As You Like It, Twelfth Night, first look at the setting. Are there any faraway places, mysterious places here? Yes, there is. The Forest of Arden with all its mysteries, right? That we see in case of As You Like It. Then we have Belmont, the home of Portia. Although Belmont appears to be another city, just like Venice, the whole episode of that casket matching, casket choosing episode of Bassanio, that episode transforms Belmont to a magical land. Is magically winning the hand of this woman. And it is also a place of romance. Again, in case of, so this was Merchant of Venice, and in case of, Midsummer Night's Dream, there is this entire fairyland where anything can happen. You can fall in love with any person. And there's this actual fairy king and an actual fairy queen. So it is a real fairyland. Coming to Twelfth Night. And this setting is so beautiful. The name of this place is Illyria. Viola, in the beginning, actually makes a comparison between Illyria and Elysium. Elysium is this heaven of the Greeks. Illyria, it sounds like illusion. So Illyria is a place which is, nowhere and then everywhere. It's a place where illusions are born. It's a place inside your hearts. So here we see that a magical land is created in front of you. And in that way, speaking from that perspective, even the Tempest is placed in this faraway place, faraway island. But we technically, again, we have limitations in calling it a romantic comedy, because it is not entirely a romantic comedy, although the romantic setting is very much present there too. The second most important aspect of any romantic comedy by Shakespeare is existence of multiple plots, subplots especially. Okay, all this Malvolio subplot in Twelfth Night, then you have this Jessica Lorenzo subplot in Merchant of Venice. And there are so many subplots. And why are subplots important? Why does Shakespeare not stick to the unity of action concept in his comedies? Because he feels that the essential difference between a tragedy and a comedy is that tragedy is about a larger than life figure, whereas comedy is about you and me. Comedy is about flaws, just like tragedies are about flaws. Tragic flaw is something which is magnified. Macbeth's ambition is far more, magnified than your and my ambition put together. Then this magnified flaw, this hubris, leads to magnified error of judgment, hamartia, which leads to magnified crisis. Now, when there are not magnified flaws, but little small little things that you and me we can also have. Suppose somebody stammers, somebody falls in love by the idea of love, which means that you want to fall in love and you fall in love, not for a particular person. This happens with Orsino in Twelfth Night. So these are small little foibles or flaws, you can say, which are present in most people, in almost all the people who go to watch these plays. And therefore, when we see these kinds of characters on stage, we realize that these people, they have the flaws that are in us. And when we laugh in any comedy or watching any comedy, we laugh at these ludicrousness, or we laugh at these abnormalities. None of the abnormalities in Shakespeare is physical abnormality. He's very modern in that. His abnormalities are all mental. Malvolio is overtly Puritan. And there were Puritan people during his times. So people could identify themselves directly in the drama. Therefore, whenever we laugh at somebody who has some flaw, which we have, we laugh at our own flaws. So this laughter is basically a corrective laughter. So we are correcting ourselves because I'm laughing at something. So next time I do that thing, I'm actually reminding myself that this is ludicrous. This is something like you should not do this. And this is how comedy becomes a social genre. It's not about alienated people. It's not about Macbeth getting lonely. It's about people coming together into a social harmony. And that is why when you have that sense of harmony, you cannot have a single plot. Because in society, you don't live alone. You live with people with you. Your life is full of subplots. So why should comedy be of single plot? And therefore, romantic comedies show multiple episodes and digressions and subplots, and which gives almost an epic structure to his plays. Then, of course, there is this angle of love. And sometimes people think that it is called a romantic comedy because people fall in love with each other in the plays, but that's not the reason. Here again, romantic in the sense that it is talking about the world of imagination. It's appealing to your imaginative faculties, and that is why it is romantic. It is not realistic in that sense. It is giving you a setting where you start thinking about this unknown place with something happening and you get excited about that place. That is romantic in the old sense of the word. Therefore, somehow, all these romantic comedies, they offer you multiple heroes and heroines, and you cannot pinpoint the central character. There are characters which emerge very important, such as Viola in Twelfth Night, Portia in Merchant of Venice, Rosalind in As You Like It, and interestingly, all these characters are women. Shakespeare had this fascination for powerful women, I guess, and in comedies we see far more powerful representation of women than in tragedies, although Lady Macbeth is a very powerful character. In case of romantic comedies, we see that he is giving you a kind of world where women are powerful, but at the same time women are disguised. Now, what's with this disguise? Why is Shakespeare so very obsessed with the idea of disguise, masquerade? And this happens in case of comedies, not tragedies. Most of the time, his powerful women are in disguise. See, Portia, she comes as a lawyer, and then she's powerful and she's disguised. In As You Like It, Rosalind is all in disguise. And then Viola, transforming into Cesario, being the smartest person in the play. And these women are so very smart. They outsmart any man around them, even minor women characters. For example, Jessica, well, that is Shylock's daughter, and then we have characters like Olivia. They are also given powerful voices in these plays. So in Shakespeare's romantic comedies, we have these very powerful women, and they are disguised as men. This was also perhaps because during Shakespeare's time, boys used to play women's roles because women were not allowed to act in theater. And therefore, if you present women in disguise, you're actually helping the makeup artist, because now he doesn't have to make the boy look like a girl. He's making him look like a girl in small little scenes, but for the most part of the play, important part of the play, with most speeches, that character is played by a boy. So this time is not a disguise. That boy is a boy, but he's playing the character of a girl in disguise of a boy. So that looked very believable. And then we also have these doubles. A lot of doubles are there. In 12th Night, we have this twin. Again, in Comedy of Errors, we have these twins. In Rosalind Celia, we have this pair. So either they are twins or they are very close friends. We always have people in pairs. So it's very adventurous, and that is why it has a romantic air too, as if it's like going on a crusade or something. So I knew that when I will be talking about Shakespeare, I would really go on talking a lot about romantic comedies, because that really appeals to me. He really made a difference here. So far as historical plays are concerned, as I've already told you, he stuck to Holinshed, made some changes too. But in plays like Hamlet, he makes a real blend, because he had this, the Spanish tragedy before him. And somehow this mode of revenge tragedy, all its violence, all its personal, enmity between the hero and the villain, all these concepts were blended in the mode of history. And at the same time, Hamlet is also a domestic tragedy. Why domestic tragedy? Because ultimately it's about a son grieving his father, and his mother getting married to his uncle who has actually killed his father, and then he's trying to act mad so that nobody is suspicious of him, tries to find out the facts, his girlfriend leaves him, and then he eventually slays his uncle, and everybody dies. And everybody dies is a popular trope of the revenge tragedy mode. In Macbeth, everybody does not die, only Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, they die, and of course Banquo dies. So a lot of people die on stage. Is Macbeth a revenge tragedy? Now, who is taking revenge? Macduff is taking revenge, Malcolm is taking revenge. But is their revenge the focus of the play? No, the focus of the play is Macbeth's fall. Revenge is the outcome of the play. It's like a resolution. So it comes at the end of the play. So we cannot call Macbeth a revenge tragedy. But in Hamlet, the whole idea of whether to take or not to take revenge, to be or not to be, that kind of a question, is the central question of the play. So that is why Hamlet is a revenge tragedy, but Macbeth is not a revenge tragedy. Julius Caesar, we also see revenge there. See, revenge is a very viable motive. People act out of two things. Either they are ambitious and do something wrong, or they want to have some justice in life. And that is like revenge. So revenge is a very important motivator, and therefore revenge is used as a motive in many of Shakespeare's tragedies, but not all of them are revenge tragedies. Okay. And although Hamlet is a revenge tragedy, Macbeth is a historical play. These are all very domestic tragedies too, because Macbeth's tragedy is about how he is taken away from everybody else in his life. His childlessness, his gradual distancing from his wife, all these things materialized into his ultimate fall. So you cannot just call it a historical play. This is seen in Marlowe too. In Edward II, we see a lot of personal, emotions, relationships, all these things are brought in the issue. Again, in Faustus, we have a personal tragedy. It's not historical in any sense. But in Shakespeare, why he chose these historical characters is that when you make any movie or any play on any historical character, people immediately know the story beforehand and they come with a certain expectation. They don't come with an expectation of knowing any fact, they come with an expectation of knowing what is behind those facts. And Shakespeare provided them with that fantasy idea or the imagination that what was going on in Macbeth's mind, what was going on in Brutus's mind. And this makes his historical plays so very unlike the other plays that were written by other playwrights before him. While I was talking about Shakespeare's early life, I did not mention his schooling. Now, that's because I deliberately decided to not talk about it. There's nothing much in it. He was not a university scholar, but somehow he knew Greek Latin, although not to the level of the university wits who were trained in that. He never had the resources that John Milton had after him. He didn't have a library full of books at home. His father was, like, as far as I know, he was a peasant, and therefore he gathered everything from life. There's a very beautiful saying that with Shakespeare, all came from within, and some people say all came from without, which means that some people think that he had no external resource. The only thing which he had was his imagination. Everything came from inside him. That Stratford-on-Avon childhood and his life experience evolving over time, that taught him. And at the same time, some other people say that everything came from without. So he did not write anything original. He only copied Holinshed. He only copied people around him. That is what they say. But I don't think that anybody could actually make Holinshed so famous as Shakespeare did, because now we know about Holinshed because of Shakespeare. Fair enough. We don't know about Holinshed other than the way in which Shakespeare wants us to read Holinshed. Otherwise, what is Holinshed? He is just a writer of dry facts who is interested in that now. Shakespeare wrote for the public, for public performance. Most of his writings were for public performance. There were some plays which he wrote for private performance. At least the first performances were private. So far as I remember, it's like Love's Labour Lost, Midsummer Night's Dream, The Tempest, Troilus and Cressida, probably there are, it's not sure. So these plays were for private performance, and later on, of course, they were performed outside too. So these were mostly the divisions according to genre, and I have already mentioned to you tragicomedies, Midsummer Night's Dream, The Winter's Tale and stuff. In tragicomedies, we have this tone of melancholy, which we have started, or rather, which we have seen already in the 12th Night, but it is now more pronounced. The line between tragedy and comedy is getting blurred. And this is how Shakespeare ends his statement on literature, his statement on life, that it is not a uniform, singular thing at all. It is a blend, and it is blended by imagination. So this was Shakespeare, and of course, just what happened after Chaucer happened after Shakespeare too. After Chaucer, we had seen that there was a void. It's like when you splash a big stone in water, it displaces so much water that it takes time to fill again. Shakespeare was that huge rock, just like Chaucer was. And after Shakespeare, it was difficult to have somebody really important, although Ben Jonson was one of the leading people in the post-Shakespearean era. He was even friends with Shakespeare, and we see that with Shakespeare's drama, the idea of morality was still there. There was some kind of poetic justice, some value given to aesthetic beauty. All these things were there in Shakespeare's play. But after Shakespeare, drama declined. With the exception of Ben Jonson, what we see is sensationalism. People were writing only for the sake of pleasing people. And in Shakespeare's time, what kind of people went to the theatre? The common people. After Shakespeare's time, now a set of fixed audience, they went to the theatre who had like no work to do and not the active workforce, and all they wanted was entertainment, and the playwrights provided that. That is the rule, like whatever the audience wants, customer is god. And here we see a gradual decline. Now, because I've mentioned that Ben Jonson was an exception, let me just take the exception up first. Ben Jonson, he was against this decline. He fought to restore the classic sense or classical sense of the drama. He was very strict about these divisions between tragedies and comedies because, unlike Shakespeare, he did not mix the genres. You would be surprised to know that his first comedy, which is a comedy of humor, Every Man in His Humor, in that comedy, Shakespeare played a part as an actor. So that was, the beginning of a very long-standing friendship too. He wrote a lot of masks, which are like those mummings. When King James, he came to throne, he rewarded him with this title of Poet Laureate, and he became technically the leading poet of the times. Although there was quite a good friendship between Shakespeare and Ben Jonson was not at all like Shakespeare. And that is why he's so relevant, because if he was just an imitator, he wouldn't have been distinguished. The type of comedy which is usually associated with him, uniquely associated with him, is comedy of humors. What is humor? Humors are body fluids which influence your thinking. This was the idea during the time, that there are 4 kinds of humors: blood, phlegm, choler, and melancholy. And people have a balance of these 4 kinds of fluids. If there is an imbalance, suppose somebody has more phlegm, somebody has more choler, somebody has more blood, then that leads to a temperamental difference or a temperamental disorder. A person can become very energetic, a person can become very talkative, a person can become very cowardly because of the imbalance in humor. Now, as I was talking about imbalance, remember when I was talking about romantic comedies of Shakespeare, that in Shakespearean comedies we have these imbalances, these follies. So that same concept is applied here, that these imbalances, these follies are because of that humor or absence of humor or lack of proper balance in the constitution of human body. And because of this disorder, we laugh at that person. And Every Man in His Humor was the first of Ben Jonson's comedies. Unlike Shakespeare, Ben Jonson's comedies or tragedies, they don't span for days and months. They adhere to the unity of time far rigidly than Shakespeare did. He never, ever took liberty with historical facts like Shakespeare did. Whenever he uses history, he uses it authentically, or rather with utmost honesty. So far as he is concerned, he wanted to be exact in his facts. Apart from these, some of the most well-known comedies by Ben Jonson are Volpone, The Alchemist, and Epicene, or The Silent Woman. Now, among these 3, we are more familiar with Volpone and The Alchemist. Volpone is about a man who is excessively greedy, has this great love of money. And in case of Alchemist, it is based on this medieval idea of the philosopher's stone. You know about philosopher's stone if you have seen Harry Potter. It's a stone which turns things into gold and also restores your soul and stuff. So he is using these metaphoric things as themes of his comedies here. And somehow they appeal to every human emotion, or emotion of every human being who goes and watches his plays. And that is why he becomes popular or became popular during his time. Coming to Beaumont and Fletcher, these people were university trained and their names are clubbed together because they wrote together. Shakespeare, he was also interested in a lot of collaborations. Marlowe and other people, they collaborated In fact, Beaumont, he collaborated with Shakespeare at times. Unlike Ben Jonson, these people, they were more into sensationalism, sometimes intensely romantic, and there is, high colored sentiment, lyric poetry. So they became very popular because they catered to that kind of demand from the audience who wanted these kinds of plays. Coming to John Webster, we have a very erudite man, but his plays, although his talent was, almost Shakespearean, if he wanted, he could write things like that, but he ended up following the path of Marlowe, especially so far as violence and blood and revenge, those things were concerned. And his most popular work is, of course, The Duchess of Malfi, which is a textbook revenge tragedy where everybody dies and it's so much violence on stage. Sensationalism again ruling here. The White Devil is another example. So what started with Thomas Kyd, the revenge tragedy, the Spanish tragedy, that continued through Marlowe, that violence, that rage, to some extent through Shakespeare, and eventually with great power in Webster. I would also like to mention playwrights like Middleton and Heywood, and you can see some of their works alongside. The point is, the whole concept of drama was kind of dwindling. It was going away from these concepts of artistic ethics. I'm not just talking about moral ethics here. I'm not saying that it was not moral teaching. Morality was dissociated from drama after this phase of morality plays. But at least there was a moral logic. There was representation of this goodness of human life, of choices, of right and wrong. Okay, damnation, something you suffer because you have done something wrong. When you take that away from drama and just show sensationalism, illicit relationships without any justified reason. Now, while talking about these men, I really want to mention Thomas Dekker, who was really an exception. I have read his play, The Shoemaker's Holiday. It's delightful. It recreates some of the Shakespearean conventions too, but he was only one man. After him, we have people like Shirley, Messenger, Ford. They were really struggling. They were struggling to stay afloat, because on the other side, we have these Puritans who were going down on the whole concept of drama itself, especially in the context of rising Puritan ethos, because right after Elizabeth, people were getting more and more in tune with Puritan ethos. Then drama was seen as a malicious influence on human mind. They were thinking along the lines of Plato that drama is corruptive, and therefore finally, just a few years after the death of Shakespeare, in 1642, theatres were closed in England, and this was decided unanimously in both the houses of the parliament. So imagine what kind of malicious influence it was believed to be, that people did not hesitate to shut down the globe where William Shakespeare had woven his magic for decades. So now that we have entered this gloomy phase of the Puritan age, I want you to meet me again in my next video, where we will be talking about the Puritan age up to the Restoration. I'll give you some idea about the background so that we can have an understanding of what we say is the age of Milton. So I have not yet planned the division of this particular phase. So I will give you a trailer of some sorts once I decide or make a concrete plan of how to divide this huge sector, from the pre-restoration to the restoration and post-restoration part, so that you have convenient understanding of the age of Milton. Hope to see you all in my next video. Please stay safe, stay happy. Don't forget to subscribe, because that's really going to make me very, very happy. This is Monami Mukherjee signing off. Thank you once again.